Thanks for tuning in. Glad to have you here. Today I have a guest with me, and I started following this gentleman probably 40 years ago, or maybe a little bit longer ago. He has been a very influential in the world of jazz. I'm just going to introduce him. Pleased to have my guest with me, Mr. Chico Freeman. How you doing, sir?
I'm fine, sir.
And you're all the way in Switzerland right now.
At the moment, yes.
Yeah. You kind of got stuck, you were telling me, because of the corona situation.
Yeah, Corona stuck us all. One place or one way or another.
Yeah, so I'm just going to recount an experience, but I'm telling you, I can't remember where it was. You must have played at Joe Siegel's Jazz Showcase.
Multiple times.
Yeah, and I think that's where I saw you. Is it possible I would have seen you and your dad there?
It's possible.
Because I didn't go there
You might have seen us at the also the Chicago Jazz Festival too.
Oh yeah, I went to that every year. I was only there for 2 years, but I caught 3 festivals and 3 of the Jazz Fests on Navy Pier, I think, or Grant Park.
It was in the park. It was in the park. Yeah. It was Grant Park. It's Millennium Park now.
Yeah, they've got that. What do they call that thing? The mirror. It's cool. So, yeah. I remember back. I lived there. I lived at Evanston from '82 to '84 with the intention of going to school, which I never did. I got accepted at DePaul and Northwestern, and then I ended up gigging.
So I graduated from Northwestern.
I was reading about that. Was that like, was it music or was it something else?
Well, I got a scholarship there for mathematics at first.
Yeah.
And then I ended up switching over to the music school, and I ended up graduating with a major in music and a minor in mathematics.
That's awesome. That's great. I remember going there too and seeing a lot. I saw Chick Corea there with Roy Haynes and Miroslav one time in one of their auditoriums. That was cool. But yeah, so first of all, again, thanks so much for being with me today. I know that I know you got a lot going on and you're busy. I would love if you would share maybe a little bit about your career. Your dad played sax, right? Was it tenor primarily?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Was that your beginning in music? Was it related to family or like your dad bringing you in or influencing you somehow?
Well, I grew up in a musical family. I started before my father, actually. It was, the seeds had already been planted. My father's father, my grandfather, was a piano player, and his best friend was Louis Armstrong. And when Louis Armstrong came up from New Orleans to Chicago, he lived with my grandparents. And my father was a little boy, and Louis Armstrong lived with him. Because when he first came up, he didn't have a place to live, so he lived there. My grandfather played piano. He was also the first black policeman on the Chicago police force.
Oh, wow!
So my father and his 2 brothers, my Uncle Bruz and my Uncle George, they used to listen to Louis and my grandfather play duets together on trumpet and piano. And then my grandmother was a gospel singer, and she sang with the likes of Mahalia Jackson and Claire Ward singers and so on. So during that time, so music was very strong in my family from that time. So my dad grew up, and it turned out that all 3 of my grandfather and grandmother, my grandparents' sons, became musicians. Wow, they had a band in Chicago called the Freeman Brothers, and my Uncle Bruz, who was the oldest, played drums. My dad was the middle child, and he played tenor saxophone. And the youngest was Uncle George, who was the guitarist. And he's alive today and still playing. The last time, I've worked with him recently in the last year or 2 in Chicago, and he's the guitarist and 92 years old and still going strong.
Man, that's great. That's really good. So the Freeman Brothers, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. They're on a recording of Charlie Parker. I mean, they recorded with Charlie Parker live. There's a record out of that. It was a bootleg at the time. It didn't release. So yeah,
you're talking some pretty epic history there. Louis Armstrong, Charlie Parker.
Oh, there's
Freeman.
more. I mean, yes, that's just the beginning. You know,
Yeah, I'm sure.
much
Well,
more.
I know some of your career, and I know we got some cool stuff coming up. Yeah, that's really cool. Well, that's a nice beginning, isn't it? Wow.
Well, at the time, of course, I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
But later, when I was growing up at home, you know, I mean, I got to listen in my living room because my dad used to have rehearsals at home. And I got to listen to Andrew Hill and Ahmad Jamal and, oh, Gene Ammons and Johnny Griffin. And in
Oh
fact,
God.
my Uncle George and Johnny Griffin had a band together. They called them the Baby Band. It was kind of the nickname because they were only 14 years old. But they were playing in clubs where they shouldn't have been, where they weren't allowed to be because of their age.
Yeah.
People turned, you know, the club owners let them play there, and they had a nickname, the Baby Band. So that was Johnny Griffin and George, my Uncle George. They went to school together, and they all went to DuSable High School, which is where the famous Captain Diet
Mm-hmm.
taught Gene Ammons and Nat King Cole and
Wow, man.
you know, my dad and Clifford Jordan and
Jeez.
Willie what was Willie's last name? Can't think of it. The drummer and you know Willie Pickens, the piano
Wow.
player,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Jody Christian, a whole bunch more. You know, so I mean that generation, you know, of guys, and it was strong. Plus, and Miles Davis, because Miles was in East St. Louis, but he used to come up to Chicago all the time because he has family up there,
Mm-hmm.
and Miles, because that's the Midwest, you know, and Miles' sister. In fact, in some of
Jeez.
Miles' later bands, he had his nephews in the band.
Oh, Vince was on drums like the last time I
Yeah,
saw
yeah,
Miles.
yeah. It's all from Miles. So a lot of Chicago families there, and even Bud Freeman, another. He's not related to me, but saxophone player, and you know Benny Goodman from Cooper.
Jeez.
And in fact, Louis Armstrong stayed. You know, he when he first came up, you know, then he got the gig with Benny Goodman. He was able to get his own apartment, and that's when he left. And then
Oh,
after he left Benny Goodman, he went to Paris. Louis Armstrong didn't, and lived in Paris for a while.
Louis Armstrong did?
Yes. So he
Wow.
went from New Orleans to Chicago, you know, and then stayed in Chicago for a while and played with, did some time with Benny Goodman in that band. And then he left and went to Europe, to Paris. And he stayed
Yeah.
there for a while. Then when he came back, he was a star.
Wow, that's amazing. Very rich history there, man.
Yeah, there's
And
more.
really.
I'm giving you a real brief overview. I mean, my Uncle Bruz was a Tuskegee Airman. I don't know if you know who they are.
Oh, I sure do. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
him and Percy Heath were together in the same company.
And the Heath
Tuskegee.
brothers, and they were based in Chicago too, right?
No, they're Philadelphia.
Philly.
But Percy and my Uncle Bruz were pilots, and they
Are
were
Yeah, any of the
uh,
Heath brothers still alive?
no, they're all gone. No, Tootie's still alive, the drummer.
Okay. Wow, man. Yeah, no, Tuskegee is a really interesting area, anyways, to just study about because that's that's really cool. So to take me further now, you were around these people, and then so you started playing. When did you start playing tenor or sax or any instrument? When
Well,
was your
I
first?
started.
Was saxophone your first instrument?
No,
Mhm.
no,
You did trumpet, right?
yes, but that wasn't my first instrument either.
Okay.
You ask the questions and then you answer them for me.
Well, I know I did, and I shouldn't do that, but go ahead.
All right, Carl.
Yeah, no, you go ahead.
Yeah, no, I started on piano
Okay,
when I was in kindergarten.
great.
And I just started messing around with it because my father played piano as well. And then I started taking lessons when I was in the first or second grade. And then unfortunately, my piano teacher passed away.
Hmm.
And that was unfortunate. And so there was nobody else around that was teaching piano. So I kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
didn't follow. The rest I learned piano. I learned all what else I learned on my own. But then I went from piano to the band, and I played trumpet in the band. And that was just because that was the luck of the draw. My brother and I was fooling around in the basement. And my father was in the Navy. You know, he was in the Navy with Clark Terry and some other people, and called the Navy Hellcats Band. And they were a pretty famous band, you know.
Yeah, I've
and,
heard of that. Yeah.
and they were stationed in Hawaii, you know. So anyway, he had stuff from the Navy, you know, his duffel bags and stuff he had, you know, his Navy uniforms, the stuff he had, and he just had packed it down there. And my brother and I, just as kids do, you know, two boys running through his stuff without permission.
Yeah.
And he had a trumpet down there and an alto saxophone. And my brother picked up the alto and I picked up the trumpet. It was just that. No, you know, just the luck of the draw. So I ended up taking the trumpet and going to school and joining the band. And that's how I went through that.
So this goes to prove, and the reason I said trumpet, not that I'm trying to defend myself, because I do tend to answer questions after I ask them. And it's probably a little bit of a nervous thing, but also you can't believe everything you read on Wikipedia. So
no, you can't.
I'm pretty sure somewhere on Wikipedia says that you were introduced to trumpet. That was your first instrument. And that's what I kind of wanted to know, because it's funny. I don't know if you know the drummer Gary Husband. He's in England, and his Wikipedia was so wrong. He tried to fix it. He ended up getting banned from Wikipedia, and had to have a friend make a new page or something. But bottom line, I'm digressing. So piano, trumpet, and then when did the saxophone come into play?
Saxophone didn't come in until I was actually in college.
Okay. And then Northwestern?
Yes.
Is that where? Okay.
Yes.
Who was teaching there? Like, did you study sax? You must have. I'm not going to answer the question. Did you study saxophone in Northwestern, and did you have any teachers outside of there?
Yes, I did study saxophone in Northwestern, and I studied with Fred Hemke.
Okay.
You know, the Hemke Reeds, which, you know, Hemke Reeds.
Yeah.
So Fred Hemke was my teacher. And when I joined the band, when I first went there, I went there as a math major, but I was still playing. I was playing trumpet actually at that time. And so I was going down to the South Side where my dad was having jam sessions. And he had jam sessions at this place called Betty Lou's. That was the first place that he had, you know, he had been on the road with the Freeman Brothers, and he had been traveling all over, you know, Vegas, and because the Freeman Brothers was a Vegas kind of act.
Mm-hmm.
And then he came back home, and when he decided to stay home and get off the road, he started these jam sessions. And that's when I got to see everybody, man. I mean, the Jazz Showcase would bring in players, Sonny Rollins, well, before McCoy, but Sonny Rollins, Clifford Jordan,
Yeah.
I just can't call it right now, but a bunch of people. And after they finished their work at the showcase, they would go down to the jam session, my father's jam session.
Wow.
And I would go down there, and that's where I got to see Gene Ammons and Clifford Jordan and bass players. I'm trying to think. Not Mingus, because Mingus didn't, not when I was at Mingus, but there's somebody. Oh, Nicky Hill, and just, you know, a lot of the famous guys around Chicago. They frequented, plus people from New York when they came in town. You know, like Buster Williams, and, you know, just anybody that was, you know, they came down there and they jammed and stuff. So I got Don Bias. I saw Don Bias.
Yeah.
Johnny Stitt. Dexter Gordon.
Dexter.
Yeah.
I saw Dexter at the showcase. That was just incredible. I had a front row seat, and the guy was really tall. I'm looking way up trying to watch him because the bell of his horn was pretty much about 2-3 feet in front of my face. It was a magical show.
Yeah. Well, I got to see that, and for a little time after that, I worked as a bartender for my dad.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to be there, and I saw Sonny Stitt and Gene Ammons together, you know, that thing, and I saw Dexter Gordon. And my dad playing together on that one, and just a whole bunch of different really great musicians coming through there. So I met a bunch of them, and so until and then when I graduated from university, I came back home, went back to Chicago, and started playing around the city and doing the gigs that were available. And during that time, I played with a lot of people. I got to work with, all the Motown people. Stevie Wonder, Isley Brothers, Four Tops, The Temptations, the Miracles, you name it, Jackson 5.
Yeah.
And yeah, all of that. I did all of those gigs, and the Dells and Curtis Mayfield and Jerry Butler
Oh,
and
man.
the whole thing, Lou Rawls, because so I did that, and that's where I met Donald Myrick, who I actually joined Earth, Wind and Fire while Maurice was still in Chicago.
No kidding.
And then Donald Myrick and I, we kind of like we were the first call saxophone players. Once the first, I think I was playing with either the Dells. I think it was the Dells or the Spinners one, and that was my first gig,
Yep.
and I was fresh and green and everything, and got on this thing, and I really liked the Donald was very nice because and it was the last minute thing. I never played because the tenor saxophone player was supposed to do the gig got sick or something. They called me the last minute. I got there. And Donald was very nice. He helped me. He said, okay, we're going to go here. And he just directed me. So we did so well that they started calling him and I together as a team.
Wow.
And that's how I ended up playing all those other gigs. It was Red Saunders used to have the band in Chicago that he ran that would always back up these acts coming in from all over the country. Black acts, because
cool.
the Regal Theater was like the Apollo in Chicago or the National in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
So I did all those things.
That's great.
And then I played with then I did some stuff on the North Side, which at the time North Side was like all white,
Mm-hmm.
So I met this guy Studer Stankouskas. He's a fusion guy. So I worked with him. It's called Street Dancer. I even recorded with him. So I played that kind of music. Did a lot of blues. Worked with the blues like J.B. Huddle and Junior Wells and Buddy Guy. In Chicago. I played in all Mother Blues and all the blues places in Chicago. So I got I paid my dues. I worked around those gigs and worked all kind of things. And then I was in this R&B funk band.
Yeah.
What did we call? What was it? Jesus Wayne was the leader. Thunder Funk Symphony.
That's cool.
Yeah, and then I also did work with actors and stuff, and Second City, and the theater in Chicago.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So and then I was actually in this movie with Diana Ross and Billy D. Williams. What was it? That movie they made together?
So the Mahogany one.
Mahogany. Yeah. I was extra in that. So I was around Chicago doing what was happening in Chicago at the time.
But there's such a rich musical history there too. Actually, I remember when I lived in Evanston, I would bop on the L and go down to the North Side, check out Junior Wells, Buddy Guy, because they were there a lot working together. And actually, my landlord's brother was not a drummer. I think he was playing guitar with them, no, not good. You know what? I don't remember. It's been a while, but so there was a little connection, and I mean, what a rich music scene it was, though, at the time.
Yeah, I know. I was there, and then I kept on going. Then I met Fred Anderson while I was in university, and I joined the AACM, which is the Association for the Advancement of Creative Musicians, and I played with Fred, and then I worked with a guy named Duck. I can't remember his Donald something. We called him Duck, and Drake was the drummer in that band. And I remember we played for Sam Giancana for his birthday.
That's cool.
So yeah. So I've my experience sort of spanned, and that was up while I was in Evanston.
Okay.
And then Fred turned me on to Muhal Richard Abrams when I left school.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And that's when I joined I came and joined the Chicago chapter of the AACM, and I began to study under Muhal. So I studied composition, and I was part of Muhal's big band and his and one or two of his small groups, and then I started building my own groups, making my own groups, and that's when I started playing with Henry Threadgill, Steve McCall, and Air, and Art Ensemble of Chicago, and all of those AACM, Anthony Braxton's, things like that. Those groups, and was doing a lot of that, and did all that until I finally decided to go to school for my master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Governor State, and then. At that time, there was what was called the Notre Dame Intercollegiate Jazz Festival. This is like what they do today with the Monk Institution, and but this preceded this. This started this long before the Monk Institution, and I competed in that with Governor State University, which is where I went to school for my master's, and I was in the band, and we competed. And that year we won. It was a great band. We won 5 awards of the awards, and I won 2 of those 5. I won best saxophonist and best soloist. And another guy won best composer. We had best vocalist and best band.
Wow.
And as a result, I don't. Was that 5? 1, 2, 3, 4. I missed one.
You missed one.
Yeah. What was it? Band. It was something else. I can't remember now, but it was 5 awards. And then because of that, we were awarded a trip to Brazil in an exchange. The governor of Illinois at the time made an exchange with the governor of Brazil in the city of Sao Paulo. So we flew to Sao Paulo, and they had somebody from Sao Paulo flew to Illinois, to Chicago. And we performed down there, and during that time, I decided Henry Threadgill had already, and Fred Hopkins, they had already moved to New York. So on the way back, we had to fly from Chicago to New York to Sao Paulo. And on the way back, I thought, hey, and that back then the airlines weren't like this. You could delay, you could have a ticket with a stop, and you didn't have to make a connection right away. You could delay it.
Yes.
So I decided to delay it for 3 days, and just see how New York was. And I called Fred and asked him if I could stay with him for 3 days, which he said, yeah. And he was living in a loft in the East Village, that loft, he was sharing it with Philip Wilson, Stanley Crouch, David Murray, and Fred. It was a big loft. So I went there and stayed there, sleeping on the floor. You know what I mean? Just for 3 days. And while I was there those 3 days, I mean, I just wanted to see. I ended up working those 3 days. Henry saw I was there, and he needed to go back to Chicago, so he was playing with a singer by the name of Jean Lee. He had to go, so he asked me if I would fill in for him. So I said, yeah. So my 3 days turned into a little more. That was in the 3 days, and then Jean Lee liked what I did, and so she asked, and the Tin Palace liked us, so that was the name of the club. So they booked us again for another week. So I changed my 3 days to another week, and I played there. And then while I was there, I met a guy named Olu Dara, and a trumpet player, and he was working with a guy named Mickey Bass, bass player who had played with Art Blakey and some others, some Michael Carvin. And I went up there to hanging out with Olu and to see him, and I sat in with Mickey, and Mickey hired me, and he was playing every Sunday for a month. So my week now turned into a month. So now I'm playing there, and then went back to the Tin Palace. Cecil John Stubblefield, who's a good friend of mine from Chicago, a great saxophone player. He was working with Cecil McBee, and he got a job with Nat Adderley. So he asked me if I could take his place with Cecil, and I did, and that was the beginning of my long relationship with Cecil McBee.
Wow, yeah.
And so that turned into another 2 weeks at the Tin Palace, and finally after that, I ran into Sun Ra, joined his band for a while, and I just figured I was supposed to stay there. So I never left.
You never used that plane ticket?
No, well, maybe, yeah, one time I did. I think I got my first recording with a Japanese record company, and it was a funny thing. I didn't really need it. I don't know if I used that, but he asked me where I wanted to make the record, and I had really preferred to make it in New York, but he asked me another, and because of the language, difference, we both had a miscommunication. He thought I said Chicago, and I thought he wanted to do it in Chicago, but both of us would have preferred to do it in New York, but we ended up in Chicago. And it was okay, nothing wrong with that. And I went back to Chicago, and for that recording, and that was my first recording.
Which recording is that?
Jesus.
Go back. Was it a Japanese release at first?
Yeah, it was on Trio Records.
I think
Morning Prayer.
Okay, I don't have that one.
That was the first one I actually recorded, but the first one released was actually after that I joined Elvin Jones, and I was playing with Elvin, and I got my actual first recording that actually came out was with Elvin, and Elvin got me that. I just never forget that. We were on a plane and going to California, to Los Angeles, And Elvin's on the plane. He says, hey, Chico, he says, you want to make a record? And I said, yeah, sure. I'm thinking he's asking me to be on his record, which is great. He says, all right. He says, so what you want to play? I said, anything you want to play, Elvin. Whatever you want to do. He said, well, it's your motherfucking record. So so that's how I got my first record taken. And so that record was called Beyond the Rain, and it had Elvin, Junie Booth, who was on bass then, who had been with McCoy before, you know.
Yeah, I know that name, yes.
And Hilton Ruiz and and myself. And Juma Santos, I had one song with percussion, which I wrote a song, Pepe Samba, which was dedicated to a friend I made and met in Brazil. This guy, Pepe, had taught himself to speak English. But
oh, that's cool. Elvin, man, what a guy.
I told you didn't ask me all that, but that was.
No, you know what? Anything you say is fine. You can just keep talking, because to me, this is actually, it's super interesting, because these are all, you're talking about so much rich history and a lot of my heroes. But my vinyl downstairs, a couple thousand, records. And well, you know what I miss? I was thinking ahead of time last night. I really miss the days of, especially in Chicago, where I could go to the record stores and I could go through, pull them out, and there was something.
The Jazz Record Mart. That's what you're thinking of.
Definitely that.
That was the record company. Record store in Chicago.
Yeah, we went. My friend Tom and I went there. I can't tell you how many times. But I would always walk out with no money and a lot of vinyl.
I used to do that. I used to go there all the time. At Coltrane, I used to buy Coltrane's records. Whatever it came out, I went and got it. Yeah, and
there were a couple on the north side that had a good selection and all that. But I miss going through record stores, and one of the things I love is to just look and see the pictures and read the notes. There's a lot that goes into my, the imagination when I think about these things, when I would read about people. But,
living in Chicago. Generation now, see, you're another generation. People that's the younger people. They miss the beauty.
Just download it now,
of LPs and things and all the information that you got. The writers that wrote on the back, the liner notes and the pictures and the history that was put in visual and
Yeah.
Not only the audio, you had a visual experience, and that was a wonderful thing. It changed. It started to change when CDs came.
Yeah.
A little because it was so much smaller. But then by the time CDs are on out and just downloading stuff, you get on Apple Music and Spotify and all these other places where you don't see anything. You don't know much. They don't give you much information about the players, about what's going on, and no information about the players' lives or anything. So a lot's gone. A lot has fallen through the cracks.
Yeah, and that was a big part of the buying and listening experience, was being able to, even if it was a double album and I couldn't open it at the store, but I could open it when I got home. And there was so much to read, and I would read it over and over and over again, and there were pictures and usually, and that was a great part of the experience of listening and buying.
Not only for the listener, but for the players as well.
Yeah.
Because think of it, players were not incognito then. Even though you knew who was on the record, who was playing bass, who was playing drums, even if the leader was a saxophonist or a trumpetist or some kind of horn player or even a vocalist. You knew who else was on the record. And so therefore, when you listened, you might have really liked what the bass player is doing, who's not, and so you could find out his name. That's why people like Charles Mingus and Jimmy Garrison and Ron Carter, all these guys, probably they were able to also develop a career.
Yeah.
And even without having to be the leader.
Right. It's interesting how much we have lost because the vinyl's not here, and CDs made it harder. Like you said, everything's smaller.
One more thing. Another note, before we leave this topic. Another thing about that is this, which I find. People listened to the music then. You only had 15 minutes on a side. Maximum 20. 20 was long. That was unusual. It was 15 minutes. So you had 30 minutes of music. So you would listen to 15 minutes of music, and you would have to get up, walk over, and turn over the record. So you had a break.
Yeah.
When you sat down and listened, you didn't sit down and listen and do other things. You didn't, you wasn't cleaning the house and doing this and doing that, and you really listened to what was happening because it didn't take up that much of your time and of your attention span. And I think people, I grew up having parties, listening parties, not just dancing parties, but listening parties. We would have a group of people, get some herb or whatever, sit back, cool, some drink,
some basil or
whatever, you know what I'm saying, and sit there and turn on a red light,
and
just chill, and we would play records, and people would then sit up and socialize with each other and sit down and listen to more music. So it was another kind of headspace. It's not that you were riding on a bike and running all over the city with headphones on and listening. But when the CDs came, all of a sudden it went from 30 minutes to an hour and to 70 minutes. Nobody has that much time. Then one more thing.
No, keep going, man. It's all good.
The artist was in full control of their presentation, of the journey that they wanted to take the listener on. We determined what the order of songs were and how we wanted you to experience what we were offering.
Yep.
But then when the CDs came, people were going to rearrange the order, and now that, just buy one song off the record or just create their own, and that's okay. But the whole thing of what the artist's intention is gone. So
I agree with you 100%. In fact, I had guys here in town. They would come over to the house because I had a house with a listening room, if you will, and we would do the same thing. They would all bring over their latest vinyl. We'd be there for hours. They'd come over 6 or 7. We'd have a bunch of dinner and then go in, and 2 or 3 in the morning, we might be done, we might not. And a lot of songs and a few beers later, maybe a lot of beers later, but we were listening, and it was a great experience. It was a great bonding experience too. It was a great musical experience. I was in a place 2 years ago. I was teaching my course in Detroit, and the two ladies who hosted the workshop took me to a place there it's all jazz vinyl. And the DJ just spins vinyl, and there are thousands of records on the wall. That's a listening place. You get in trouble if you're talking there too loud. And it's really cool to have that experience. I don't know the name of it. I'd have to figure it out, but it was refreshing to me to be in that environment again.
Well, those were some great days, and that's when I enjoyed music the most.
Now, take me forward a little bit, because I was just watching, I might be skipping a few years here, or maybe not, but I was watching some video recently of you, and I don't know if it was Aaron Scott. I don't know the bass player. It was you and McCoy Tyner.
Avery Sharp.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, but he's tall, right? Tall guy.
He's shorter than me, so he's not very tall. But he's tall enough.
That's what I meant. He's not tall. I think I got confused, because I've actually never seen Avery live, and the pictures I've seen, he looks tall. It doesn't matter. Bottom line, I think it's Aaron Scott and
Avery.
Yeah.
And McCoy and myself. That was the band. Yeah.
So the two questions I want to ask you, because actually I wanted to go back and ask this, and you can go in whatever order you want. I want to ask you, what was it like to work with McCoy, and what was it like to work with Elvin? Because he's definitely top of the list drama hero for me. Love that guy.
Which one do you want first?
Hey, whatever you want. Let's talk about Elvin first. Let's go with Elvin.
Elvin, it was great. As I told you, Elvin gave me my first record.
Right.
So that was a great experience. I was always a big fan I wanted, when I left Chicago, I had it in my mind that I was going to play with everyone that played with John Coltrane in that band.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
I didn't make it with Jimmy because he had passed away before I got to New York. But I did. I made it with Elvin and McCoy and Reggie Workman.
Oh, wow, man.
So, and Reggie Workman was a part of my band for a while. So that was great. To this day, he and I are still very good friends. Elvin, though, was great. And I learned well, my favorite drummer is Elvin Jones, period.
Yeah.
You know, and for me, he's from the Midwest. He's from Detroit, and there's a way we play. I don't know where you from.
Syracuse, New York.
Oh, you're an East Coast guy. I don't know about. I haven't heard you play, but I have noticed that the East Coast guys like to play on top of the beat. You know, way up front. They they do that. They're edgy.
I would agree with you. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So I find guys from New York and even Philadelphia, you know, that tends to be the case. But in the Midwest guys, we play behind the beat. We relax. Not way back, but very relaxed. And if you think about, I did a personal thing and I found out there was a study done that 99% of all the hits of any music, the music is relaxed. So what I noticed is that if you think about it, and if you check that out, James Brown, almost all the R&B groups in the big hits, almost in anything, even Frank Sinatra, they play back behind the beat, relaxed. Only the East Coast, you don't hear, not so many hits are on top of the beat, you know, way up.
It's too cold up here. I think we do that because it's cold weather.
Elvin, no, it's not colder than Chicago, man.
That's true. Yeah. Okay, that was a bad excuse. It's not working. So that's where I learned to play. I mean, I learned to play in all three places. You know, behind it, right on top of it, right in the middle, and on. When I played a lot of Latin music, because I did that too in New York, and it was all in New York. It's way salsa and everything like Tito Puente and this stuff is way up. Yeah. When I went to Cuba, they're relaxed. They're back. You know, it's still Latin, but it's relaxed. So I found that out. So that I knew that, but coming from Chicago, that's what we do in Chicago. It's relaxed. It's behind the beat, and so that's what Elvin was great at that. And Elvin had a knack for knowing the right tempo of that a song should be, regardless of whose song it was. Yeah. He just had the correct tempo. So playing with him was an education and a joy, and plus, he was great. So, and McCoy, then getting to play with McCoy, because was wonderful. I was with him for 5 years, on and off. I played in various. I was in his big band. I was with him at Carnegie Hall. They had a 2-piano thing with him and Eddie Palmieri. And then I was 5 years with that band you saw with Avery and Aaron Scott. And so I was able to really work with McCoy over time. He was like a mentor. Yeah. But more by what he didn't talk much. He didn't say much. Like a lot of those guys, they didn't really talk about nothing, but they showed you with their actions or with doing, or you had to be smart enough to learn to be observant. Oh, sure, yeah. So that's what it was like with those two guys. I saw McCoy on many occasions. The last time I saw him, Regatta Bar, Cambridge, with Eric Harlan, Michael Brecker, and Charnette Moffett. And I was so close to the piano, I could have reached out and hit the high keys. And to be that close to McCoy when he was playing was an experience, because you could feel his energy. I just love that guy. I think I have everything he ever recorded. By any chance, did you work with him with Wilby Fletcher at any point in time? No, I didn't. I knew Wilby when Wilby was in the band, but I didn't get a chance to work with him with Wilby. No. Wilby was up here for a while, twice. He lived here for a few years, and we used to hang out a lot. And then I took lessons from him, and he taught me how to play melody on drums. That kind of changed everything for me. Yeah, I worked with him with Eric Pravat, and but I played. And the Cuban drummer, I can't think of his name, Ignacio Bero, because I did a recording with him with McCoy on CBS, La Leyenda de la Hora. Oh yeah. And so. Yeah, and then and Elvin recorded a couple of records with me besides the other records I had. Right. So it was great. Jeez, man, that's great. So I don't want to take up too much of your time here, right? Just a couple more things for now. First would be, do you have any up and coming projects that you know of that are going to happen, COVID or not? Maybe a recording? Anything coming up in that arena?
Well, I was supposed to do a recording, but we didn't get to it yet. The COVID canceled that, so I'm still waiting to see where that's going to go.
Okay.
I have my band, which is the Chico Freeman Quintet, which features Zakai Curtis and Esiet Okun Esiet, and a drummer from Chicago, Ernie Adams, and a young vibes player from Chicago, Thaddeus Tukes. So there's that.
Great.
And sometimes, so that's a project that I do, and I have a couple other projects that I'm doing. One new one was I did this called sort of a gospel jazz kind of mix thing with some the voices of Chicago. They are four singers from Chicago, great singers, you know.
Yeah.
And then recently, I have a cousin. She's a great singer, and her daughter is a great singer. So now I'm putting together a project with her and her daughter, and it's going to be. It's not a straight up vocal thing. It's vocal.
Mm-hmm.
It's a mix of vocal and real instrumental. So there's usually when instrumentalists give a vocalist, they sort of water down the instrumental part. Yeah. And this is different.
Cool.
The vocalist is strong as the instrumental, and vice versa. It's a really.
That sounds fantastic.
So I'm trying to see, but as far as and I'm in the process of recording some of the music now. We're working on it. So.
Awesome. That's great. So my last question for you would be this. We were talking a little bit off camera before we started rolling about musicians, up and coming, let's say, musicians. And I know when I was talking with Dennis Chambers recently, he was saying everybody's playing everything fast. It is interesting to hear, though, from people who have such a rich experience, so much knowledge like yourself. What words of wisdom would you be sharing, or what do you share with up and coming musicians?
Well, people. The thing is that you don't do the same thing that somebody else did before you. I mean, that's not how innovation happens, or how change happens by doing something else. But jazz is always, a lot of people have been interested in playing fast. Dennis Chambers said that, but I think when I was coming up, that was somebody said that to me, was an R&B guy. Mm-hmm. He was like, jazz players always got to play fast, and that's always been. I mean, think of Johnny Griffin. He was the fastest gun in.
Right, man.
That was his nickname because he could play really fast, and a lot of guys played fast, and others played slow. But there was always some in the battles. It was always about playing rhythm changes and fast and all these other things, and even Coltrane playing giant steps, which at the tempo, which you have in moments notice. And I mean, so jazz has always been about technical mastery at certain speeds, as well as, but also being able to play melodically. So I say this. If you want to increase your musicianship, everything should be played slow first anyway. I mean, you don't get to play fast if you can't play slow, because otherwise you just end up practicing your mistakes, because you play fast and you can cover up mistakes easier when you're playing fast. But you play slow, they are, the covers are, the curtains, the wizard comes out from behind the curtain. And so playing slow is good. It's also when you practice and everything, you should practice slowly as well, because it'll be solid, and then you'll find out you can raise your tempos after that, and they'll be really good. You'll be not just fast but accurate. So my advice is always play slow, and be able to play slow and melodically, and understand things. And if you as you work on these advanced harmonic things that you may want to do, lines and so forth, and chord progressions or out, just take in everything you can do and try to play everything so you can hear what you're doing and internalize it, get it, into your muscle DNA, like the way you eat, when you eat, you don't even think about bringing a fork to your mouth. You do
Right.
things without thinking about it. And that's what you want to do. That's why Charlie Parker said you want to learn everything to forget it. So and that's slow is the thing of the day. Now Dennis Chambers talking about playing, he's actually talking about, playing more groove pocketed, slower things. And it touches people more than fast things. So I think, but people have to follow their own instincts.
Yeah.
And march to the march of their own drummer, and I think that's very important. And if that means playing fast for you and doing certain technical gymnastics, then you got to do that. You can't worry about what other people say. You have to do what you do. Just to give you a really quick.
Yeah. Go ahead.
When I was coming up, I was very eclectic. I mean, I could play R&B and gospel and jazz and funk and all that because I played with, like I said, all those bands I mentioned, and I played with James Brown and Aretha Franklin, Shaka Khan. Shaka, we grew up together, so.
Oh, that's cool.
So I knew how to do that.
Love her.
And I did that. And I also played the Latin stuff and the fusion stuff. I really had a broad musical education and experience. So sometimes, and of course, the jazz, which I was all into, which I hate the word jazz, but okay, but that's another story. But all of the, the more, the masters from Sonny Rollins to, everybody that's played and plays fast and doesn't. You see, Sonny's an inventor. He just creates melodies and rhythms. He can play fast, but he doesn't. That's not the thing that he does. Yep. So I can do all of that, and I was happy to do that. But, and I played out because I played with Cecil Taylor and
really?
Coleman, and I worked with Cecil and Ornette, and I had an opportunity to do that, and
I love that guy, man.
Ham Rivers, So I just my experience, and I played a lot of Latin music and Afro-Cuban music and Panamanian music. I did all of that, and African music. I worked with great African musicians and Indian musicians, and all of and Spanish. I did flamenco.
Oh, love it.
Yeah, so I just want to play music. I just thought it was only, like Duke Ellington said, there are only two kinds, good and bad, and I just look for whatever touched me. And when I would record my records, I would have sometimes influences from various places. I would sometimes be eclectic. And at that time, that was a criticism that I received, that I might have been. And today, though, eclecticism seems to be the order of the day. Everybody's happy. So I sort of feel like Colin Kaepernick. So, back then and now. So, he took a knee and now everybody's taking a knee. But they still didn't give him credit for it.
Exactly, yeah. It's interesting. I remember one of my first lessons with a really great drum set teacher, drum. I wanted to impress him, so I did this thing. He said, "Can you play something like this?" I said, "Okay." So I did it way up tempo. It's like, "It's great, man. Can you cut it down by about 75% in tempo? Can you play it slow?" Of course, I couldn't do it, and that was a deep dive into the initiation of what it really meant, and everything you just said. Practicing my mistakes over and over. I didn't have any control because I couldn't play it slow. So, 45 whatever years ago, that was a great experience. By the way, what was it like to work with Cecil Taylor? Because I saw him at Grant Park. I don't know who the bass player was, but Ed Blackwell was on drums. And I was just like, that. I'd never seen or heard anything like that live before. What was that like for you?
It was great. When I got to that, what I found out about it is that he was misjudged by many people, including musicians, and that was that he was a great musician and an innovator and an individual. His compositions, they were really compositions. To many people, it sounded like he just was improvising, like just kind of doing it. But he could play that. These things he's doing, they were written, and he developed that technique, so they were actually songs that he could play again, just like you could play the melody to "In a Sentimental Mood" over and over again. He could play his compositions over and again, those melodies that he played. So it wasn't total improvisation. I mean, there was the themes, and then he would improvise. So, but his themes were structured or in such a way that was quite so far out that people mistook that for that. They didn't understand that. So that was the first thing I learned, that he was really a musician, a true musician, and that what you heard him play could be written out, and if you could read it, you could play it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
There's an album of. There's a story behind, I think, this album. There's an album with Cecil and Coltrane. I don't know the rest of the band. It's a quartet or quintet. I believe the album was supposed to be recorded, or maybe it was, under Cecil's name, but then they released it under Train because they thought it would sell more copies. But I have it downstairs. It's in my vinyl. It's a beautiful album. I love it. I can't remember the name of it.
Send me the name of it because I don't know that one. So send it when you get a chance. Send it to me. The name.
Absolutely, I'll shoot you an email with that. Yeah, it's a beautiful album. I love it.
Well, the first one I heard of him was Unit Structures. That was the first record I heard that Cecil did.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, that's what I thought about playing with him. I loved him, and we were good friends too. We used to hang out.
Yeah.
And he was so respectful of. He came and listened to people like my dad. He loved my father. He listened to John Hicks, piano player. He just loved John Hicks. Sure. He listened to all the guys, man. And I mean, so here is this guy who's so different and so, like this, but yet he was always at the vanguard. We would hang out at the van. We would go listen to different people that came through that, and so people almost. He wasn't that much of an outlier in the sense of the community. You know what I mean?
Right.
He was a big fan of all the people, and even though but he followed his own voice, his own drummer, and he was able to play that stuff slowly.
I love it, man. Well, all the advice you've given, it's just so relevant, so important too. Don't try to play like somebody else. Influences, yeah, but create your own thing. And that takes time for a lot of people, right? But that all this advice is so needed, I have to say, and I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah, sometimes I worked with Mal Waldron for 10 years, and Mal Waldron is a great guy. He used to always say that sometimes you have to learn to play. You learn what people do, so you learn what not to do. Because a lot of guys. Back in the day, it was about having but this is kind of a cultural thing. This is an African-American black cultural thing. This is a thing that we just do. I mean, look at in basketball. Michael Jordan is kind of like a direct descendant of Dr. J.
Yeah, exactly.
But Michael Jordan did almost the same thing that Dr. J, when Dr. J took off from the free throw line, and dunked from the free throw line to the, just after the free throw. But then Michael won the slam dunk contest, but taking off behind. And what he did in the air was different. So he learned something from Dr. J, but he put his own thing on it. And that's the thing. It's about it's the individual expression. So you want to be yourself. You have to. It's good to learn. There's a story about a guy who's walking down the street, and a trumpet player, and he thought he was so original, right? He thought he was that original. And he's going and he listens. And he's coming up a club, and he hears this trumpet player playing in the club, and he's going like that. Who is that? He said, "Damn, that guy sounds like me." He's thinking that the guy stole from him. He walks in there, it was Kenny Dorham.
Oh, geez.
And Kenny Dorham started playing before this guy,
Yeah.
So he realized, and I'll tell you who the guy was too. And he goes, "Oh man!" And that's when he realized that he needed to go back home, and so he did that. And that was Lester Bowie. So.
Oh really? Oh my God! Yeah. I love Lester, man. I love Lester Bowie. I wish I always wanted to meet him and see him, but he passed away a long time ago.
Yeah, so that's why for me, a lot of the guys that came out of the schools and universities, it's better now. They came out of they sound like cookie cutters, they were all just, now it's a little better, you know what I mean? Some of the guys are coming out and they're sounding individual. You can hear the influence and the respect, but I'm more interested in when a guy does something different because, that's. Anyway, Lester, that's what I mean. That's and that's a cultural thing, man. That's a cultural thing. Gene Ammons never sounded like Sonny Stitt, and they stood up with each other all the time.
Yep. Did you ever work with Rashid Ali?
Yes, I did.
Oh man.
I thought he was a good friend too. Don Pullen and
Love that guy, man. It's another one I wanted to meet because he influenced me heavily. By the way, going back to Mal Waldron, I never saw or met Mal, but I know his daughter Mala and did some gigs with her years ago. Sweet, sweet girl. Do you know Mala? Did you ever meet her? Yeah. Yeah. She's put out some beautiful music. I miss doing those gigs. That was really fun. But
those are great days, man. Great days.
I do what I do now, and I really love what I do now, and I'm happy. And what I really enjoy now is talking with you, and it keeps music in my life. Plus, we'll share this, and people get to learn. You know, they get words of wisdom, they get some history, and there are a lot of people who are going to appreciate this very much.
All right, well, look, I'm gonna have to go now, but
yes, I want to say thank you for joining me.
If you want to do a part 2, we can talk about that, and
yeah.
And make sure you send, when you get it all edited, send me.
Absolutely, yeah. I'll send you a link. But anyways, yeah, I was just about to wrap up. I just want to say, Chico, thank you so much. Appreciate the time. You're looking great. Stay healthy, man. Keep doing what you do. It's amazing. I love it.
All right, man.
I'll be in touch.
Okay, bro.
Thank you again.
Peace out.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.